I was 10 years old when my mother locked me outside during a snowstorm for forgetting to wash the dishes. She didn't yell. She didn't threaten. She just walked over, turned the deadbolt, and flicked off the porch light like she was switching off a habit. "Frostbite builds character," she said. Then she turned up the volume on the television. I stood on the porch barefoot, wearing a cotton t-shirt from Goodwill and pajama pants I'd outgrown. The snow came halfway up my calves. It didn't sting. Not at first. It crept in, slow like shame. I knocked once. Then again. She could hear me. I knew she could. Her glass of cheap red wine was half full. The TV was playing one of those shows where people clap for strangers. She never clapped for me. My hands went numb around the 20-minute mark. Somewhere around 30, I stopped knocking. Not out of acceptance, just because I couldn't feel my fingers. I pissed myself to stay warm. That lasted a minute, maybe less. I remember thinking that if I died, maybe she'd finally cry. Then I realized probably not. She'd tell people I was weak, that I always gave up early. That's what she said when I failed my math test. When I couldn't eat Brussels sprouts without gagging. When I cried after the neighbor's dog died. She said boys who cry don't survive winter. So I didn't cry. She opened the door an hour later. I know because the street lamp behind me had flickered off. That happened at exactly 9:30 every night. I was staring at it when I heard the lock turn. The sound still shows up in my dreams sometimes. Not the cold. The lock. She looked at me like I'd interrupted her show. "You're lucky," she said. "Some kids don't get second chances." Then she walked back to the couch. Didn't ask if I was okay. Didn't offer a towel. Didn't even say goodnight. I stood in the doorway until the feeling returned to my toes. And that's when the pain started. She didn't take me to a doctor. She said hospitals were for rich people and attention seekers. I couldn't argue. My lips were too swollen to speak. She tossed me a towel from the laundry basket and told me not to get blood on the carpet. When I tried to sleep, my hands throbbed, the kind of pain that made time stretch. I lay on my side, under 2 threadbare blankets, listening to her ice cubes clink against the glass while she laughed at the TV. The next morning, she made me a peanut butter sandwich for breakfast. No apology, no mention of the night before, just a smear of peanut butter on a dry heel of bread, placed on a chipped plate like nothing had happened. "You still have 10 fingers, she said. "Be grateful." I nodded, ate the sandwich, chewed until it scraped my throat raw. It wasn't about being hungry. It was about not giving her the win. She smiled, that thin victory smile she wore, like lipstick. "See, you're tougher now." I wore gloves for a week, even in class. When the teacher asked why, I said it was for fun. I was a weird kid. That made it easier. The blisters peeled by the second Friday. My thumbs looked like raw meat. I couldn't hold a pencil without bleeding. When the school nurse asked me about the injuries, I told her I spilled hot soup on myself. She looked at me for a long time before sighing and writing me a hall pass. That's how it worked. She didn't hit. She didn't scream. She just made me a problem that no one could quite name. Cold house. Quiet kid. Enough weirdness to shrug it off, not enough to investigate. Smart. Strategic. A month later, she bought herself a new coat. Gray wool. Expensive. Still had the tag on when it arrived. She posed in front of the hallway mirror, spinning like she was 17 again. "You like it?" she asked. I was doing homework on the floor. My hands were still wrapped in gauze. "It's warm," she said. "Not like that cheap crap we get from the charity bin." She didn't buy me one. That winter I walked to school in a jacket that barely zipped. The sleeves were too short. The cuffs stiff with old stains. When I got frostbite again, this time on my ears, she said it was my fault for walking slow. "Character takes time," she said. "You've got a lot to build." I stopped asking for anything after that. Stopped reminding her when field trip forms were due. Stopped mentioning school picture day. Didn't even tell her when I got straight A's. I figured if she noticed, she'd find a way to ruin it. So I just disappeared inside the house. Lived like a mouse under the floorboards. Quiet, fast, forgettable. She liked it that way. On my 11th birthday, she told me I was adopted as a joke. I believed her for 3 days. Started fantasizing about my real parents. Warm people, soft-spoken, maybe looking for me. Then she laughed during dinner and said, "God, you're so gullible. Of course you're mine. Who else would make something this disappointing?" She handed me a cupcake with no candle. I thanked her. That winter was worse than the one before. She kept the heat off during the day, said we were on a tight budget. But she still bought wine, still got her hair dyed every other week. I asked her once if she could turn on the heater in my room just while I slept. She stared at me for a long time like I'd insulted her personally. Then she said, "You want warmth? Earn it." By 12, I was earning my own lunch money doing homework for other kids. $5 per assignment, 10 for science fair projects. I saved every dollar. I kept it in a coffee can hidden behind the water heater, wrapped in plastic and silence. She never found it, but I started keeping it under my pillow anyway. The scar on my left index finger never faded. Pink, shiny, curled like a hook. I used to stare at it during math class, tracing it with my thumb until the pain numbed everything else. I never forgot the sound of the lock, the way it clicked shut, the way it didn't open for a long, long time. Years later, when people asked me how I learned to code, I told them, I liked being indoors. They thought it was a joke. It wasn't. Some kids remember their favorite toy. I remember the exact temperature at which your tears freeze. I didn't rebel. I didn't run away. I just learned how to disappear without moving. Middle school passed the way migraines do. Slow, colorless, and mostly inside my head. By 13, I knew which floorboards creaked, which cabinet doors made noise, and how to breathe in the hallway without catching her attention. My best survival tactic was silence, not the obvious kind. The kind that makes you harmless, forgettable, not worth yelling at. I wasn't abused the way movies show it. There were no slaps, no broken plates, just subtraction, small things disappearing over time, birthdays, hugs, eye contact. I learned that hunger passes if you drink water and lie still. I learned that bruises fade faster if you keep pressure on them overnight. I learned that if I cried, she'd roll her eyes and say, tears are what people use when they run out of usefulness. She didn't beat me. She neglected me with intention, the kind of neglect you plan. She told the school I had mood regulation problems, said I was off, that I needed space and routine. Her story was neat and practiced. The teachers gave her distance. No one wants to be the one who doubts a grieving mother. Grieving what? She said my dad died before I was born. Later I found out that wasn't true. He left 6 weeks after I did. Apparently, he got the memo first. I started reading manuals, not books, manuals, programming ones, assembly guides, wiring diagrams. I found a discarded desktop tower near a dumpster behind the middle school and took it apart like a sacred ritual. I didn't care about what it could do. I just liked the certainty of circuits. When something broke, I knew why. That was more than I could say about her. By 15, I was repairing calculators for kids who'd dropped them, replacing cracked screens on school-issued laptops. Teachers started slipping me busted projectors with $20 bills paperclipped to the back. I never asked questions. I just took the work. They thought I was a genius. I wasn't. I just liked problems with instructions. At home, she got worse in quieter ways. She started taking her wine earlier in the day, watched courtroom shows while chain-smoking by the window. Sometimes she'd talk to the TV like it was a friend. Other times, she wouldn't speak at all for 2 or 3 days, just nodded or pointed. That was almost worse. One night, I was walking past her door when I heard her say something on the phone. Her voice was flat but sharp like a butter knife through a ripe peach. Honestly, I should have swallowed the damn pill. I froze. Whoever was on the other end laughed. She didn't. No, I'm serious, she said. All I got out of that pregnancy was a tax return and silence. I stood there a long time. Didn't cry. Didn't go to my room. Just stood. After maybe 10 minutes, I walked back to the kitchen and did the dishes. Everyone. Polished the sink, cleaned the stove, left a sticky note on the counter. Done. Everything's clean. She didn't say anything the next day, but she left a 20 on the counter. That's when I knew I wasn't a son anymore. I was a tenant with no lease. High school was easier. I had an excuse to stay late. Computer lab, robotics club, AV work, anything that kept me off the property until dark. I stopped telling her where I was. She stopped asking. At some point, she just started saying, if you're not dead, you're fine. I took that as permission. She never once came to a parent-teacher meeting, never signed a permission slip. When the school counselor called her to talk about college, she told them I had mental instability and emotional dependency issues. I found that out when the guidance counselor asked if I had learned to manage outbursts. I hadn't had an outburst in years. I spent my 16th birthday sitting alone in the IT room, cataloging outdated textbooks for a local library digitization grant. When the librarian brought me a muffin with a single candle, I didn't know what to do. I almost cried. Instead, I turned off the lights and just stared at the flickering wick until it melted into itself. I didn't make a wish. I already knew what I wanted. I stopped dreaming about escape. Started planning for extraction. It wasn't going to be some big showdown or emotional storm. I just needed time. And a door that didn't lock from the outside. I applied to every scholarship I could find, even ones I wasn't technically eligible for. Created fake parent signatures. Wrote essays in other students' voices for extra cash. When I got the email that said, "You've been accepted," I didn't celebrate. I just printed it and folded it 6 times until it fit in my back pocket like a knife. The day I told her I was leaving, she didn't even look up from her crossword. "You always said I'd never make it out," I said. She shrugged. "Even a broken clock gets lucky." That was the closest I ever got to a goodbye. She didn't throw me out. She just stopped pretending I was inside. She didn't slam the door when I left. She just didn't ask if I'd be back. I left on a Sunday. She was watching a rerun of a reality show about house flippers, laughing like the contestants were old friends. She didn't look up when I walked past with my backpack. I'd packed the night before, one change of clothes, laptop, $812 in a cracked envelope I'd kept taped behind the water heater for 3 years, my thumb drive, with the software I'd been writing since sophomore year, and my social security card, stolen from the drawer in her filing cabinet while she was asleep. I stood at the door for a second, just watching her. She sipped wine from a mug that said "Number 1 Mom." The handle was chipped. The irony wasn't. "Going somewhere?" she asked, eyes still on the TV. "College," I said. "Got a full ride." She turned down the volume with the remote, finally looked at me. "Let me guess. Some diversity scholarship for broken kids with sob stories?" I didn't answer. "Don't embarrass me out there," she said. That was it. That was my send-off. No hug, no be careful, no I'm proud of you. I left the house, key on the table. She didn't notice. The bus ride to campus was 8 hours. I didn't sleep. I watched the window like it might try to remember me. Every town we passed looked warmer than the one I'd left. When we crossed the county line, I checked my pulse. Still there. Still me. Just a little less broken. Campus housing put me in a triple dorm with 2 engineering majors from suburban families. They brought full-size refrigerators, LED lights, 3 gaming consoles. I brought silence and socks with holes in them. One of them asked me if I was a transfer. "No," I said, "just trained different." I ate 1 meal a day for the first semester. Used the free coffee in the library to stay full and stay awake. When my roommates went to parties, I stayed behind and rewrote my codebase, building a stripped-down platform that could scrape grant listings, categorize eligibility requirements, and automate low-income submissions. I called it Door Code. Number 1 knew about it. Not yet. I got a job at the campus help desk fixing admin laptops. $10 an hour. Under the table. The IT manager had shaky hands, so I did most of the repair work while he took naps behind the firewall logs. Every night, I ran simulations on my code. Every weekend, I added new modules. Loan calculators, auto form fillers, PDF converters, signature forgers. Sometimes I forgot to sleep. She never called. Not once. The first winter on campus was brutal, sub-zero. Wind that tore across the buildings like it was hunting warmth. My coat was second-hand, bought from a thrift shop where the cashier didn't look me in the eye. I wore 2 hoodies under it, plus thermal socks I stole from the campus laundry room. My fingers cracked, but they didn't blister. Not like before. I bought a space heater off Craigslist for $15 and wired it directly into the wall socket, bypassing the dorm safety circuit. I didn't tell anyone. Warmth felt like contraband. I didn't make friends, I made systems. By year 10, Door Code was functional. Ugly interface. But it worked. I uploaded it to a free server and watched as traffic trickled in from community centers, libraries, public schools. I didn't attach my name. Didn't need to. People just started calling it the tool. A senior professor found out I was sleeping 3 hours a night and working 30-hour weekends. He pulled me into his office one afternoon. "You're going to burn out," he said. "That's not a badge of honor." I looked at his framed family photo. Warm living room. Kids with braces. Wife in a soft red sweater. I didn't say anything. He offered me a mentorship. I declined. I wasn't building for credentials. I was building something bulletproof. The campus closed for winter break. Most students flew home. Some stayed with friends. I stayed in the computer lab. Showered in the gym. expired protein bars I stole from a vending machine with a broken lock. One night I pulled up a street view of my childhood home. The window still had that cheap plastic film taped around the edges. Her car was parked in the driveway. Same wine bottle in the bin. Still living. Still cold. I closed the tab, opened the next line of code, wrote if user.income equals 0 and user.hope equals 0, use open door, Mars, and smiled. She thought locking the door would make me beg to come back. I just found a better exit. By 24, I was the operations director of an organization nobody outside the system had heard of. We didn't have commercials. We didn't do press. We powered infrastructure. The nonprofit was called Lanthorn Systems. On paper, we provided automated processing software for underfunded government programs, housing, food security, education grants. In reality, we ran the backbone code that made a dozen citywide portals function like they weren't built in 1996. If you applied for a needs-based benefit in the Midwest, chances are our code filtered your application before a human ever saw it. And that filtering system? It was mine. I didn't use my real name. Too much baggage. I signed emails as E.M. Welling, short for a name I never told anyone and a last name I'd stopped claiming. I lived in a one-bedroom apartment over a pawn shop, Had blackout curtains, industrial fans, and a cot with no headboard. I liked the noise. It kept the ghosts outside. Every morning I made tea, sat by the radiator, logged in, and moved numbers that moved decisions. Most people who get power advertise. I kept mine in spreadsheets. When a state agency needed to restructure their elder care approval algorithm, they reached out. Their old system flagged applicants based on income, but it didn't account for fraud or dependency issues. They wanted something cleaner, more ethical. I wrote a filter that prioritized long-term risk indicators, history of elder abuse, prior evictions, withheld family contact, known signs of psychological neglect. They called it elegant. I called it revenge in beta. We tested it in 3 counties. Within 2 months, applications dropped 14%, not because people stopped needing help, but because we filtered out people who thought the system was too dumb to notice patterns. It wasn't anymore. One morning, my assistant forwarded a flagged application. This one keeps getting caught in the delay queue. Might want your eyes on it. I opened the file. ID number 4790204. Applicant name Carol Welling. Date of birth February 14, 1966. Current status pending housing subsidy and medical assistance. Notes: evicted, no living family reported, disability claim attached, currently residing at state shelter pending program approval. I didn't blink, didn't breathe either, just scrolled down. There was a photo attached, her applicant ID taken in the shelter hallway, fluorescent lighting, hair thinned, wrinkles deeper than I remembered, but the mouth was the same. That same tight half smile that always looked like it was mocking something. She wore a hoodie I didn't recognize, and makeup that hadn't been blended. Trying, I thought. Still performing. She listed, estranged son, whereabouts unknown, under family history. There was a note in the intake room. Subject reports son abandoned her years ago without explanation. Claims he suffered from emotional dysregulation, unresolved trauma. I stared at the screen for a long time. The cursor blinked like a metronome. Under supporting letter, there was a PDF. I opened it. My son has always been difficult. I did the best I could under the circumstances. I'm not a perfect person, but I tried. I just hope that someone gives me a chance to heal. Everyone deserves at least one second chance. I laughed. Quiet. The kind of laugh that doesn't move your face. We had rules about approvals, but we also had executive discretion. A line at the bottom of the screen read, "Override available. Admin sign-off required." Below it, signature field, E.M. Welling. I clicked out of the file. Didn't sign. Not yet. That afternoon, I sat through a board meeting where people discussed user onboarding, regional discrepancies, and pilot program funding. I contributed, asked the right questions, smiled where appropriate. Nobody knew I was sitting on a file that made my blood turn to glass. After the meeting, I went back to my desk, opened the file again. Her face hadn't changed. That smirk, like she still thought the cold was character, not consequence. I looked down at my left hand. The scar on my index finger was still there. Always would be. Her application was waiting on one name, the only one she taught me never to trust. The file sat in my queue for 3 days. I didn't touch it. I processed other requests, responded to emails, ate lunch in silence, approved dozens of cases without blinking. But hers, I let it sit. Every morning it was there. Applicant 4790204, flagged as pending override authorization needed. Waiting for me like a forgotten voicemail from a number I hadn't dialed in years. I told my assistant I needed to review one of the shelter cases in depth. She didn't ask which, just nodded and brought me tea. Peppermint. My choice. I stared at the steam curling off the surface for a long time. It reminded me of the breath I'd watched float up from my mouth the night she locked the door. I opened the file again. Carol Welling, 58, unemployed, diabetic, arthritis, 2 minor hospitalizations, 1 unpaid ER bill, no known assets, no insurance, no family. Her medical report included handwritten notes from the shelter nurse, chronic joint pain, difficulty with stairs, requests heating pad daily, mood swings, unresolved grief, possibly unmedicated depression. At the bottom, in her own words, all I need is a little help. I've made mistakes. I just want to feel safe for once. Safe. The irony hit harder than expected. I clicked over to the grant system log. She'd applied to 3 different programs in the last 2 months, all denied for incomplete paperwork. This one, the state elder care subsidy, was her last shot. Approval meant shelter access, prescription coverage, and subsidized meals for the next 12 months. Denial meant nothing. No fallback. No second wave. Under reason for override request, a caseworker had written, subject is likely to deteriorate without aid, limited support options, no family response, may not survive the winter without assistance. The cursor blinked beneath my name. E.M. Welling, administrator override. She didn't know I was here. Didn't know I'd built the filter that caught her. Didn't know the cold was coming back for her. I moved the mouse, hovered over the field, thought about the wine glass, the porch light, my skin cracking in the wind, the door that never opened until it was too late. I signed. Application status: denied. Timestamp: 4:41 p.m. Decision authority: executive admin. That was it. No fireworks, no sound, just another digital signature among thousands. Another case moved to archived, another number buried in the noise. I logged off early that day, went home, made tea, took a shower hot enough to steam the walls, wrapped my scarred hands in shea butter and socks, and lay on my back, staring at the ceiling. Didn't feel triumphant, didn't feel guilty, just warm. The email came 4 weeks later. Subject: case update 4790204, Carol Welling. Sender: Regional Program Officer. Hello. Following your recent denial on the elder care housing application for Ms. Carol Welling, we are closing the case file. The applicant passed away last week in a public ER preliminary cause, septic infection, untreated. No listed emergency contacts, no next of kin. The county will manage burial under indigent remains protocol. No funeral date, no obituary, just a file number and a link to a database that no one reads. I stared at the screen. Didn't flinch, didn't smile. Just clicked archive, closed the browser, drank my tea, went back to work. We were onboarding a new city the same week. Their welfare system was 2 decades old. I spent the morning integrating our tools into their eligibility portal, refining the parameters, training the auto-verifier to flag inconsistencies in case files. At lunch, I ran a script that generated approval letters for 3,482 applications. Single mothers, former inmates, disabled veterans, people the system usually misplaced. She was the only one I ever lost sleep over, and she taught me how. Later that night, I logged into our pilot heat shelter project. We'd installed biometric locks in several repurposed buildings, unused schools, old churches, abandoned libraries. The doors opened automatically for anyone flagged by our system as displaced under 21. No IDs, no question, just warmth. Door code ran the logic backend. The sensors tracked how long each person stayed inside. The system was logging a record-breaking month. I watched as a boy, 14, maybe 15, entered one of the shelters just past midnight, dirty coat, torn sneakers, fingerless gloves. He sat down by the heating vent and held his hands out to the air like it was a gift. The timestamp on the footage read 12:03 a.m. I watched for exactly 60 seconds, then closed the feed. I didn't cry, didn't speak, just turned my chair toward the window. Snow was falling, software, thick, silent. It looked like the kind of night you could die in without anyone noticing, unless someone rewrote the rules. I don't open doors for people like her, but I make sure kids like me never stand outside one again. That's all for this story. I'll be back with another one. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. It motivates me to create more content like